Ed Elson is an analyst, writer, and co-host of the Prof G Markets and First Time Founders podcast. And most importantly, my stepping stone to get to Scott. Exactly. Welcome to the pod.
We got to be real.
We got to be real.
It's all about Scott.
You know what? No, it's not. I am thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah.
But we all know what my main goal is.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's good when people are honest about their intentions.
I love honesty. That's the way to do it. Do the people listening know who Scott is?
Yeah, they're my followers, and all I do is talk about
just
Scott.
Plug in Scott Galloway.
Yeah,
okay.
So they better.
Okay,
no, in all seriousness, I'm so excited to have you on the pod. We had a great chat about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness a couple months ago, and I'm so excited to get into it with you. And I love listening to you on your pod. So. Let's get into it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It's not going to be every question, but I do want to know what's it like working with Scott. Tell the listeners.
Oh, yeah. It's a roller coaster. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I was a huge Scott Galloway fan back when I was in college, and I reached out to him and I got an internship with him. And, it started out just doing sort of bitch work, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Scott would think that that's very important.
Oh,
and good
exactly.
For you.
That's the whole thing. You have to put in your time beforehand,
100%.
And then you get the rewards later. And so, I was working as an analyst, putting together his decks. I mean, some of the listeners might have seen his TED Talk, which was kind of big last year. It was the most viewed TED Talk of the year. So we were working on stuff like that, and we were working on his newsletter and his books and all this stuff. And then he wanted to launch this podcast, and it's been amazing. And I guess the thing that's so great about Scott, he talks about the struggles of young people and how young people aren't getting enough opportunities. He really put his money where his mouth is when it comes to me, because he basically just said one day, hey, I know you're 25 years old. I know you don't have that much experience in life or in business even, but I think we could do this podcast together and I think it would be good. And that's what we did. And it's been an incredible time. So he's a crazy person, but in a good way. And yeah, I mean, it's the best thing that's happened to me.
When he talks about, how young men are struggling, I feel like you are the complete antithesis of that. Like, I feel like he wants all young men to model themselves after you.
He wants me to be like a total disaster.
No, I think that he wants all young men to be more like you because you're super hardworking, you're a hustler, you save money. When he talks about this idea of masculinity and what's masculine, it's like taking care of the people that you love, like making money, showing up for people, and all those things are like what masculinity should be. And I feel like you're a great model for that.
That's really nice. I mean, I'm probably just projecting that onto the podcast to like cover my ass, but yeah, that's the goal. Is we're trying to show people, especially young people, how they can basically make it in this world that is kind of stacked against them in every way. And so, yeah, I think that's the benefit of having a young person talking through these issues with him. Is I think you do need to hear the young person's perspective. And if I'm doing a good job of being a role model for young men, so be it. That sounds good with me.
I really like the intergenerational perspective on things. I think that's such a great dynamic that we don't often see on podcasts or shows. Like I love it. And I think it's very valuable and meaningful. Do you identify as a Gen Z or millennial?
I'm Gen Z.
You are Gen Z.
Yeah. The Gen Z cutoff is, I think it's 2027 now. So maybe 28. I'm 25. I'm about to turn 26. So I'm firmly Gen Z. I'm on the older end-ish.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm Gen Z.
With respect, and I mean this is a compliment, you read very millennial to me.
Oh, good.
Because I feel like, and I want to get into this, like I think of millennials as pretty hardworking and conscientious, and they know what they want, and they kind of, they like to have fun, but they really do grind it out. And that's kind of how I read you.
And what is Gen Z then?
Well, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the best and worst traits of the generations? Pick a couple. Gen Z, millennials, baby boomers. You can take it from whatever standpoint you want, but I think work ethic and kind of orientation towards economics might be a fun place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll go with Gen Z because that's the generation I know best and I'm part of it. I think one thing that I respect about Gen Z is how opinionated we are. And I think that's underrated. I think that's a good thing to have very strong opinions and to, take issues very seriously. I feel like with the millennials, there's this sort of like, there's a very deep sense of sarcasm and irony with everything. Like you can never take yourself too seriously as a millennial is my read. But with Gen Z, I feel like there is an interest in getting involved in issues and taking them seriously. And, activism and social justice, these are things that we know Gen Z cares a lot about. And I respect that. So the way I would describe Gen Z is very active with our opinions. The thing I don't like about Gen Z is that we're very lazy with our actions.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because I was going to say, what good is having strong opinions if there is no action behind them?
Exactly. And so this is my big problem with Gen Z, is we love to have all of these opinions on how we're going to save the world and how we need to embrace sustainability and how corporations need to get their act together, blah, 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 blah. We keep talking, but then when it comes to actually taking action on these issues, we never show up. And the best example of that is just voter turnout.
Right.
I mean, we look at what happened in this last election. Gen Z was very outspoken. We have been for a while. Only 40% of us showed up to vote.
So crazy.
It's the lowest of any generation by far. In fact, it's lower than 2020 and lower than 2016. So this is my issue with Gen Z. I'm not sure exactly how we fix that, but it's certainly a problem that I have with our generation. We're very, very active with our opinions and at the same time very lazy with our actions. And it's frustrating to me, and I'm sure it's frustrating to other generations too.
Do you have a hypothesis as to why the voter turnout in your generation was so low? Like, I mean, really practically, like what was stopping young people from going to the polls?
I think we're lazy.
Okay.
And I think things that are slightly complicated and that require paperwork, we are not interested in. It's a lot easier to post a story on Instagram expressing your support for some social justice cause. And we know how to do it, and we're digitally native, and so that's very easy. I genuinely think the reason we don't show up to vote is because filling in the paperwork, registering to vote, all of that stuff is a little bit kind of confusing. It was kind of built for a boomer brain is what I would say. So I genuinely think that's the issue, is like we don't really get our act together when it comes to, okay, I need to sign up and I need to register, and then I go to the ballot box. I need to make sure that I'm in the right district and I'm in the right county, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff is boring to us and we're lazy. And so that's why we don't do it. I think that's the only reason.
I read an article not so long ago, I think it was in the New York Times, about the return of young men specifically, but really Gen Z, to the church, how they're seeing an uptick in young men going back to the church. And I mean, the reasoning behind it was they were hypothesizing because the church is traditionally a place where men have more power. We're seeing a swell of this right-leaning kind of for younger men, and I'm wondering what your take is on that. Do you think that that's why, or what other reasons could there be?
I buy it. I haven't heard that take, but I buy it. I mean, I think there's definitely this resurgence in like the Sigma mentality. The stat that I saw that I found was crazy is that Bible sales this year hit a record high, and they're growing. Bible sales are way outpacing overall book sales. So it's not that we're reading more, like we're specifically reading the Bible.
Right.
How you say that thing about church. I guess that makes sense to me, and I feel like there's probably kind of like some Sigma alpha social trend that is contributing to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the last remaining places that, obviously you and Scott talk a lot about how women are outperforming men in so many verticals. And it's kind of like one of the last, and I'm generalizing, I know there's lots of, great churches that are very progressive out there, but it's one of the, in its most extreme form, is one of the only places left that men are really, they're leaders. There's certain positions that women cannot hold in the church. There are certain rules that, the man is the head of the household. So it's like, all of that thinking. I think there is a connection between this like alt-right manosphere bro podcasting. It's like, oh, well, let's go to this place. I feel like I'm not doing well. Scott always says this is the first generation where kids are not going to make more money than their parents and whatnot. I feel like a loser. I'm, playing video games. I can't get a job, all this stuff. I'm going to go back to the one place where I'm told that I'm still better than women. Yeah.
So I think that's a cynical take, which I'm down to run with for a bit.
Yeah.
But I think there's a more positive take as well at the same time, which is people are lonely.
Totally.
And
totally.
There is a sense of community and belonging at church,
Yeah.
which is very meaningful to people.
For sure.
And I think that I think that's the other reading on what's happening with this interest in the church and interest in these communities, which I'm super down for and I'm super supportive of, to be honest. Like, if it's basement playing video games versus go to the church, like,
100%.
I pick church every single time.
100%.
And so I think there are the two reads. I think there's definitely, I'm sure there's a little bit of a manosphere element to it, but I think, and I hope, that overwhelmingly what's happening is people are recognizing how lonely they are, and we can get into this. I think the loneliness is the biggest problem with our generation. I think it pretty much explains every trend we're seeing in business, in technology, in politics, in media. I think the loneliness thing is the issue of our time. And so
I
this
hope
seems
it's
like
that.
a decent
Yeah, no. And
way
by
to
the
solve for
way,
that.
I hope it's that. There's, as you said, two reads, and maybe they're both true a little bit, but
Right.
I think that the breakdown of community in this country and the breakdown of kind of like core values
Yes.
it is why so many people are miserable. I think a lot of Americans also are pretty disgusted with the kind of lack of shared respect that we have for each other right now. And again, when it's at its best, the church does teach positive things: kindness to your neighbor, helping, charity, being a good person.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people would like a return to basic human decency, which are values that the church teaches and
Exactly.
propels. So, yeah, I think there's probably a little bit of all of it.
I think there's all of it. And I think above all, there is the connecting with other humans.
Totally.
And that's the thing that is missing most. I mean, my belief is that all of this is downstream of our technology. I mean, if you just look at the amount of time our generation spends on a screen, if you actually add up the days that we're on our devices, it comes out to 109 days per year.
That's so
that
depressing.
we're just on our devices. If you look at the amount of time that we're sleeping, it's 105 days. So that gives you 150 days left over to live your life. And, I think about all of the issues that this has caused. I mean, you got the anxiety, like anxiety rates or diagnosed anxiety rates up 134% since 2010. You look at the depression rates, which are up, again, more than double, up 106% since 2010. Again, when the iPhone was basically released. But the number that is the most concerning to me and the most significant is 12%. And that is the share of Americans across all generations who report having zero close friends at all.
Right.
12% of the country. And back in 1990, that number was 3%.
Wow.
So you've had what started off with like a tiny little fraction of the population feeling like they're lonely. And suddenly it's gone to, you look at 8 to 9 Americans on the street. One of them has no friends at all.
Yeah. No,
So
it's a crisis.
what do you do with that at that point? And I think that's what we're trying to address. How do you connect to people? And I think basically all of the trends we're seeing are a reflection of the fact that we are desperately craving human connection. Mm-hmm. And again, it's basically just a function of, it's basically a scheduling conflict because we're spending 40% of our waking hours on the phone. Mm-hmm. So we have 40% of less time to like live our lives, to go connect with people, to hang out with people, to meet women and meet men. So I really think it's all downstream of that, which is why I'm so obsessed with this loneliness issue. And I think it explains the church stuff.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I actually think that, what you were speaking to about your generation and Gen Z and their kind of ability to not to act and go do things, I think it's connected to the technology because
Yes.
I think that this reliance that we have, this obsession, this phone addiction that we have, I think that it makes people very unable to deal with like real life. I
Yes.
think that it, like, if you look generationally at just discomfort, like, it's funny that there's this trope of like boomers being Karens, which is true. I get that. But I think that like on a very basic level, the younger people are completely inequipped to go to a Starbucks and have something go wrong. They can't do it. They have a mental breakdown to the point where
I have a mental breakdown.
it's right. No, but like it to the point where they are literally, they would rather not go out. They would rather order something to their house because, oh, well, what if this is, might be cringe, or, oh, what if someone, sees me, or what if they don't have my drink and it's embarrassing. And it's like a complete inability to deal with real life. And the knock-on effect is, to your point, they're not meeting people who they want to date. They're not making friends. They're not, that's all part of life.
Exactly.
And I think that the loneliness, like it's all connected to, it's a full blown crisis.
Yes. And I think so there is no doubt that, living our lives online, we're more used to it. It's more seamless. It's more easy. It's easier to just order food to your house. It's easier to just like swipe on dating apps versus going out and like trying to meet people. It's easier to just bet on Robinhood. It's all easy. And I think, this is something that I think people are starting to recognize. I think the other side of this that we're not paying enough attention to is, again, just the amount of time we actually have in our day now to practice these things.
Right.
We're operating with 40% less time than our parents did.
It's so crazy when you
because
put it that way.
we're on the phone the whole time. Our parents had 40% more time to practice these things.
Right.
And so we're basically we're out of time.
Yeah.
Like I'm already overwhelmed, even when I'm really good about my phone. I'm already overwhelmed by trying to, work hard and be a good boyfriend and do all of the general life stuff. So we've been dealt this terrible hand where our brains have been hacked by the phones. We're struggling with all the anxiety that we're getting from the phone itself. And then we don't even have enough time left over to go practice being a real person in the real world.
Right.
So of course we're going to suck at all of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. I really recognize it because it corrupts your brain. And I have had I love to go out. I love to be around people. I love to party. I love to drink. I love to all that stuff. I have had so many moments where I'm like, I wish I could go home and scroll on my phone.
Oh yeah.
Which is like one of the worst feelings that I've had as an adult. Like, and I hate it, and I'm trying to fix it.
Yep.
But it's so addictive that you do sometimes have that. Like, if the party isn't that fun, our parents' generation would have said, you know what, I'm going to stay, and maybe you meet a person, or maybe you learn something, or you have a little bit of fun later on in the night. We're just like, oh, you know what, I'm going to go home and I'm going to scroll. And for me, the worst part when I get really technical is like, I don't have any memory of the time that I spend on my phone, which for someone who I really am afraid of dying. I'm very obsessed with like getting every last ounce out of life. I will be on my phone for 3 hours scrolling. I don't remember anything.
Nothing happens.
Exactly. But 1 hour walk with a friend, you have that memory, and it builds who you are. It's really hard to rewire our brains.
It's so difficult. And it's hard to know what the solution is. One thing that I do, because I think the phone time we have to respect is extremely not fun, but it can be therapeutic.
No, it can. Like there's
I
that
do need
meme
time
where
to
it's
scroll
like,
on my phone.
It's like despite the horrors, they're still laying in bed with phone. And it's like, and I'm like, yeah, like there's literally nothing like coming home. It's quiet. You get in your bed. You just plug in your phone, and you're just sitting there. And it's like, it's unbelievable. It feels unbelievable. They designed it that way.
Now, what I will say is, if you plan that, and this is what I've started doing with my girlfriend, we'll have a big day.
You have phone
and
time.
We'll say, okay, at 5 p.m. we're coming home, and we're both going to sit on our phones for an hour.
I love that.
It's so nice because I don't feel any of the guilt. I'm it's planned doom scroll time.
And you have a cutoff time?
We don't have a specific cutoff time, but we generally give ourselves like an hour.
Right.
And there's no guilt. We don't even, we can be like, this was a funny meme or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's planned, and it doesn't feel as depressing as I think, doom scrolling can feel. So I think that's one solution. But, when I think about like what the scrolling is a reflection of, again, it all to me comes back to the loneliness issue, because what has happened over the past like decade or two is, as the amount of time that we've spent on our phones has gone up, the amount of time that we have spent with friends has gone down. So since, I think in the past decade, the amount of time that we spend with our friends has gone down 70%.
That's horrifying.
And in that same time, you've seen basically a comparable increase in the amount of time that we're spending on our phones. And the thing that's so interesting to me, there was this study that MIT did, and they basically found that the feeling of loneliness activates the same parts of your brain as the feeling of hunger.
Wow.
So you have the same, when you start to feel hungry, it's literally the same neurons firing off in your brain as when you start to feel lonely. And what that basically tells us is interacting with other people, it's not like it's a human desire. It's like it's actually a neurological need. It's a necessity that we hang out with other people. And so we've spent all of this time on our phone. We've restricted the amount of time that we're spending with friends and actually connecting with people. And so when I look at like what's happening on the internet now, I view everything as everyone's crying out for help to connect with someone.
Right.
We're constantly craving in our subconscious brains, I need to figure out some way to connect with some person, which is why you look at your TikTok feed and you're scrolling and like, it's not like a feed of like landscapes and products and experiences. It's all people.
It's all people.
It's all faces telling you about their lives, telling you about what their workout routine is, because we've gone into a culture where the people, I mean, I hate the term influencers because it's not that people are influencing, it's that they're acting as a proxy for a friend.
Totally.
And that's what this has become. And there's this other study on Instagram. It found that pictures that feature a human face are 38% more likely to get a like than pictures that don't have a face.
Do you hear that, guys? Good tip for the algorithm.
Big tip. You need to put your face up there.
Yeah.
You see it on YouTube too, with the thumbnails.
The thumbnails, yeah.
Giant faces.
No,
those are the best
people want to connect. People are desperate to connect. I do feel a little bit like we all need to be proactive, and we kind of need to be the change that we want to see, as corny as that sounds. It's like, I read this great article in The Atlantic a couple weeks ago about like nobody has parties anymore. And you know, a party is a great way to connect with people. A party is a great way to engage in like the messy and human parts of life. It doesn't have to be a rager, but you know, the article basically said throw 2 parties a year.
Agreed.
Pick a dinner party, do a theme, throw a barbecue. It's literally a good thing to do for yourself and 100%. For your community, and we kind of need to do it. I mean, I'm super proactive. Sometimes I feel, you know, a little bit lame because I'm like scheduling with people all the time. I see my friends like pretty much every day. I see a friend for coffee, a walk, something, whatever. But I'm super proactive about it. It is work, and we have to your point, work even harder to get away from the phone. But at the end of the day, when I look back at my week, if I've seen friends, I'm 1,000 times more happy, more fulfilled, more inspired, more creative. But you kind of have to like do the work.
Yeah, and you have to invest in that. And also we have another issue, which is that our generation is incredibly flaky. So it makes it even more difficult to schedule things because sorry, I really wish I could make it, but just this thing just... People didn't have the option to do that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You can't just cancel. Like things take time and you have to plan. And so that, I mean, I'd love for our generation to just stop being flaky, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you have to recognize is like, yeah, you do have to invest and you have to put yourself on the line and face the possibility that maybe people will bail. And it's kind of a scary thing to say, okay, I'm going to do this dinner party. Right. I hope everyone shows up. But if you're not investing your time in doing that, what's the alternative?
Right. Exactly.
There's nothing else better to do with your life and your time than to create experiences. And I can tell you what the alternative is. It is being on your phone.
Scrolling on your phone and saving 1 million inspo dinner parties on TikTok and being like, I should do that. And
putting it on a mood board.
It's not fulfilling. It's just not. And it's like, you know what? I think maybe I wrote that article about how therapy speak is making us all bad friends. I said that.
Oh, I love that.
And I think like nobody is a greater advocate for therapy than me. I have anxiety. I get that. But I think we've made it so casual to the point where people use it and they're like, I couldn't come, I have anxiety. And it's like, I don't know. I think we need to be really specific. And then people complain and they say, oh, people are flaky. Fine, sure. But to your point, number one, what's the alternative? And number two, well, after someone has flaked on you 3 times, stop inviting them.
Yes.
And invest in new friends. And again, it's work, but like again, what is the fucking alternative?
There is no alternative. I love the point about the therapy speak. What are some of the things that you hate that people say, or some examples of that?
I think, we have just gotten to a place where we're so afraid to call out bad behavior,
right?
Because maybe they were having, a bad week, or whatever, they're triggered, or they have anxiety, whatever. But people are just like, oh, I'm really overwhelmed. And I get it. Like if you stayed at the office till midnight the night before, but I think we're all adults and we know when someone is being real, when someone is like, hey dude, I'm underwater. I can no longer come to brunch on Saturday because I have to work or whatever, or I have a medical emergency, whatever.
Yes.
But just some people are like, I don't, I can't come.
I think the way to think of it is like, say you had like a job interview. Would you feel comfortable saying the day of the job interview, hey, I'd love to come. I'm really excited about the job, but I'm really struggling with my anxiety right now, and I'm having a mental health crisis, and so I can't come. Sorry, bye.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that question is no, you would not feel comfortable doing that because you feel a responsibility to be respectful of their time and to show up for them. Why wouldn't you have the same approach with your friends? Mm-hmm. If your friend has planned something, I just think we should feel more accountability and more responsibility to show up. Like if you're going to bail, you better live with that guilt.
I agree.
You better feel really, really bad about that.
You need to feel
because
bad.
the other person has put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to make it happen. And then, it's your fault that probably you're having a mental health breakdown the day of. Maybe you didn't have your shit together earlier in the week.
Right.
And now everything's compounding, but now it reflects badly on you and it's ruining the dinner. I'm so with you on this. I think people need to show up for their friends. I think you should really try to never bail unless it's really important. Also, be on time.
Totally.
That's one thing about our generation that also annoys me is we think it's like completely fine to just be late to everything.
Yeah.
Because you can just text. I'm on my way. 5 minutes. Be on time. It's just respectful to other people.
Yeah.
People have shit to do.
Yeah, I think we've just gotten sloppy as a species. And what I tell my community is you have a choice. You can participate in that or you can be different. Yeah. And it's not in a pick me way. I really I think that in this next era, the people who will be remembered and stand out are the people who don't flake, show up on time, write thank you cards, can know how to read a book.
I really respect thank you cards. Yeah.
Know how to form an opinion. It's work because if it wasn't work, everybody would have good manners and everybody would be memorable and interesting.
Exactly.
And like at the end of the day, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but it's like, which group do you want to be in?
Yeah,
I know for me what I want to be, who I want to be, and it's a choice.
100%.
All this talk of online addiction, but yet I read on Instagram this week that you said that you think you have to be online for 8 hours a day in that interview. Give some context about that.
This is the dilemma for our generation.
Yeah.
If you want to live a healthy and good and fulfilling life, ideally you're not spending all of this time on your phone. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who runs basically a production company for TikTok. And he has a hiring rule, which I think is not healthy, but I think is reflective of where we are headed, which is that all employees must show that they spend at least 8 hours per day on their phone.
So crazy.
That's the rule. And it's dystopian and it's scary, and for a lot of reasons I don't like it. But I do think that there is some value in that point, in that if you want to succeed today, if you want to be on top of the ball, if you want to succeed in an online society, unfortunately you kind of have to be extremely online.
Totally.
And this is his point. It's like if someone doesn't understand what the trends are, not of yesterday, but of 6 hours ago,
right,
then they're not well equipped to be working for this company. I think it's different based on different industries.
Based on your job, yeah.
But, my friend he works in social media. People are spending more and more time on social media. If you want to win that game, unfortunately, you probably have to spend more time online than anyone else.
Do you consider yourself chronically online?
I do, but I try to I try to be managed about how much time I'm spending online. Okay. I try to be thoughtful about it. It's to the best of my ability, I try to make it a choice. So I know that I have to be online. Specifically with my job, I need to be checking the news all the time, and that means that I'm at my computer. Mm-hmm. That's the hand we've been dealt, and it's something we must live with. Why am I doing it? Because I want to be good at my job and I want to get rich.
Right.
Because getting rich for our generation is extremely difficult today.
Totally.
And that's right now while I'm young and I'm in my income earning years, that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
You know, I want to make a lot of money. I want to be successful. And then eventually I want to kind of put the phone away and bring those hours
And
down
live
to
like
like
Scott.
2 or 3
Yeah.
at least.
Scott lives the great life.
He's nailed it.
He's
done
like
it.
killing it.
He's
Like
killing
his
it.
life is so good. And I agree.
Yes. But right now, when we're young and, you know, there are all these economic issues that we can also get into, I think my job is to try to make a lot of money, to try to be successful, maintain my health while I'm doing that. But if you want to be successful today in 2025, yeah, you're going to have to put in a lot of hours online.
I want to ask you if you think that the audience would have a different reaction if I said the exact same thing that you just said. If I said, I want to get rich, I want to do that, I want to take care, I want to, you know.
I don't know your audience that well, but
Or any audience. I was having a conversation with my community this week about how women need to be better about letting each other be ambitious. And I think it's like such a great thing that men do where, you know, man to man, you can hear a guy say, oh, I want to make a lot of money. And you're like, I respect that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for women, you know, when you say something like, I want to make a lot of, like, I don't know that I would.
I think you're right.
You know, it's just like a weird double standard, and something that you and Scott, you know, brings up a lot is like, despite all the advancements we've made, women are still measured their success on their relationship status, and men are still their success is measured on their financial status.
Yeah. And it's a fair point. And I being a dude, I hadn't thought about it that much. I think one thing that is worth thinking about, if there's someone listening to you say that and they're like, you know, fuck Tinx or whatever. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay. What I would say to that person is, we're all in this together. Like,
Totally.
both men and women, the cards are stacked against them from an economic perspective today.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the price of housing today, the
I
median.
thought you were going to say eggs. I was like,
Yeah. Or we look at the price of eggs, which is also insane, but that's going to come back down because it's a problem with birds getting the flu.
Right,
We'll
right.
figure that out.
yeah.
The housing,
Will we?
We will. I think we'll figure out something.
I don't
or
know.
we'll stop eating eggs
I
and
don't know.
we'll just revert to
All
veganism.
right, go on.
The housing problem is
Fucked.
tough.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we're going to figure this one out. The average price of a home today is $420,000. It's a record high. The average age of a home buyer today is 56 years old. In 1980, that number was 30. God. The average, so, you know, people our age were buying houses. That was normal.
Right.
It's not normal today. The average is 56. And you just compare it to like our grandparents' generation.
Yeah.
You know, the cost of housing for them, the average cost to buy a house, it was 3 times their income. For our parents, it was 4 times their income. For us, it's 6 times our income.
Right. It's like,
So you basically need to work a job for 6 years, spend zero money, and then you can buy a house, which of course is not possible. You look at the cost of college. The average cost of college for our grandparents' generation was 13% of their annual income. For us, it's 42%. So, like, none of this works for us. So if there's anyone who's saying, oh my God, like, you know, whatever they would say about you for wanting to try to get rich and to make money, my response is like, we're all fucked.
yeah.
So it's at least someone's doing something about that. I think that's the most important thing we need to be doing.
No, totally. And to be fair to your generation and any young person, I think that the stats that you just shared contribute to the malaise and, you know, and sadness and like lack of work ethic that is, you know, spoken about when it comes to younger people.
Yeah.
It's, the odds are really, you know, you do think, why would I, you know, why would I work hard when I don't have a shot in hell of owning a home?
Exactly.
And I think it's really interesting how it contributed to like this little treat culture economy where people are like,
what is this? I haven't heard this.
so it's like people who are kind of thrown in the towel saying, I'm never going to own a home, therefore I'm going to buy myself a little treat every day. Things are bad. Like,
oh Christ.
It's the type of thing where it's like, you know, they're buying a lot on TikTok Shop, or they're getting, you know, the fancy coffee every day and whatever. And it, in a way, I understand, because people aren't going to save their way out of this Is that correct?
Well, that's what people are saying, but unfortunately, I think there is a way out, and it's
not through saving. I think people looked at it and said, I can't. It's not going to matter whether I buy a fancy latte every day or not. I'm still not going to buy a home, so I might as well just like give myself a little treat to make myself feel better.
I would argue against that.
Okay.
I think if you're just saving and just putting your money away and just letting it sit in a bank account and, you know, earning interest on the cash, yeah, that's not going to work. I think there is a way out, and it's very difficult. I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to be making good money.
Okay.
So whatever you need to do to earn a good income, Scott talks a lot about this. You need to identify your talent.
Right.
You need to, get realistic about your dreams. Don't just go follow your passion. Try to think about what you're good at and try to provide value into the world. So you need to be making money. Mm-hmm. You do need to be saving. And the third thing that needs to happen is you need to be investing in stocks. That's how we do it. And
how much richer could I be if I invested in stocks?
10% a year is if you just invest in the S&P 500. Historically, you look at the last 30 years, you're generating a return of 10% every year. And that doesn't seem that much off a tiny little asset base. And when it starts, it isn't. But my belief is that is the only way out.
That's the way.
Andrew Tate says, okay, we got to escape the matrix by doing drop shipping and buying Lamborghinis and, getting cam girls and basically running like a prostitution ring. That's his solution for getting out of the matrix. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the way you do it is you figure out a way to save as much as you can and invest that in the stock market. That's the way that our parents got rich. Mm-hmm. The only benefit that they had is that they were dealing with a stock market that was a lot cheaper and houses that were a lot cheaper. So it was a lot easier for them. Yeah. So we need to be really diligent about, okay, I need to invest as much as I can. And this S&P 500 thing, it really is a miracle. I mean, 10% a year over 30 years is really impressive. Hedge fund managers around the world would kill to have that.
Right.
And it's not very expensive to do it. You can find very low cost ETFs.
What's an ETF?
This is an index fund where you basically put in money in it and it collects the value of all of the top 500 companies in America. And you can pay a tiny little amount. So, if you want like specifics, you can get into SPY. That's a common ETF to get into. There's a cheaper one, VOO. Find whatever you'd like. Mm-hmm. But it's a very simple strategy. Try to save as much as you can and invest in the S&P 500. That, for me, is how Gen Z escapes the matrix. It'll take a while, but that's the only option I could give you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I am so financially illiterate and I consider myself a pretty smart person. It's just like not, I wasn't taught at it. I think a lot of people are afraid. And I'm also very like risk averse. Like I am very like boomer in that way. I'm very like, I want to keep my money under the bed. And like, that's my vibe.
Yes.
But I have recently been thinking about my desire to get rich and how I feel like I should literally and how I should hire someone to help me with that and do it.
Okay.
Because
you could do that too.
It's hard.
I don't think you need to. I think it's less complicated than it needs to be. Just ignore all of the crypto bullshit. I think it's very simple. You invest in S&P 500 and I'm happy to show you how to do that and how much you should be putting in. But it's actually the safest way to do it. It's very reliable. You're basically just buying a stake in the American economy by doing that, which is doing super, super well. And, that's basically the only way to do it. Something Scott and I talk a lot about on our podcast is, the reason that our generation is getting screwed economically is that the economy has been splintered into two groups where you have the earners, and these are the people who make money and get rich by earning an income, and you have the owners, and these are the people who own assets and get rich based on the value of those assets going up. And what we have in America is a system that is heavily rigged in favor of owners.
Right.
It's a lot easier to get rich. If you look at the taxation system, the fact that the highest tax bracket on income is 40%, but on capital gains, it's 15 to 20%. You know, we generally reward people for getting rich by owning stuff versus earning stuff. And that sucks for us because it's only old people that own stuff.
Right.
So my advice is like, do whatever the fuck you can to start owning things. I don't really care what it is, so long as it's not crypto.
Yeah.
But
I want to ask about that.
But you need to be trying to find a way to own stocks. Maybe you want to try to buy a house, but I think that's very difficult.
Is that a good thing to do if you can do it? If you can stretch, would you, if someone, we'll talk about like rent forever theory and talk about like, if someone was on the fence, if someone felt like they were a young person, they could stretch and maybe buy a home, but it would be tight. Should they push themselves to do it or just keep renting?
I think with the house, I think there is a bit of a cult of home ownership in America.
Right.
Where people have this thing in their heads that you're only successful if you own a home.
Well, it's the American dream. That's what they said.
Dream.
You know,
and that's what they've drilled into us.
Invented by realtors, right?
Exactly. And I don't think that's true.
Right.
I think that you can be very successful and not own a home. I also think that, you know, it can be a valuable investment and there's an element of forced savings to owning a home that can be valuable. I struggle with the home thing because the price of housing is just so freakishly high and I keep waiting for it to come down.
It's a drop.
And every quarter it's like new news, like we're still not figuring out how to build more houses.
No, it's insane.
I mean, we just saw literally a couple weeks ago, housing starts, i.e. the number of new houses that are being built, they just dropped by like one of the biggest drops ever. So people like aren't building homes, and that's why the cost of housing is so high, is that there's too much demand and not enough supply. So I'm a little bit ambivalent on like, oh, should you buy a home or should you not? Like, I think it's very situational, but what I'm not ambivalent about is that you should definitely be buying stocks. Like if you're kind of worried like, oh, I'm not sure if I should buy this house, like take that money and just invest it in the stock market.
Yeah.
And you're going to be generating a great return from that. And you can still keep paying rent and it's not the end of the world. And maybe you can buy a house later when prices come down. So I don't know. Housing is one of those really tough situations. I don't have all the answers to it.
Yeah. And it's also location dependent as well.
Totally
like
location
where you
dependent.
are.
Exactly.
If you're in a neighborhood that's upwardly mobile or whatever, then fine. But, you know, a lot of these neighborhoods are volatile. I think we're going to see a lot of just a really interesting things when it comes to, you know, neighborhoods. And I used to live in LA and thinking about all the changes going on there post-fire.
Yep.
This is going to continue to happen, as in major changes when it comes to the value of neighborhoods,
yes.
I think.
Yes.
I would have to guess.
I think it sounds like you kind of know your real estate a bit. What I would say to someone's like, oh, should I buy a home? It's like, I would ask, have you done your homework? Like,
right.
Do you understand the value of a house? Do you understand the value of this neighborhood?
Yeah.
Do you have reasons why you think this neighborhood is flourishing in a way that other neighborhoods aren't?
Yeah.
Those are the questions that I would be asking. And if your answer to all of those, like, I have no fucking clue, then maybe just go for stocks instead.
Right.
And, you know, you'll be fine doing
that. So crypto, everybody's talking about it. Explain to someone who doesn't know what cryptocurrency is what it is.
It's a fake stock in a thing that doesn't generate any money.
Okay. So you don't like crypto?
I don't like crypto.
Okay.
You know, crypto is like, it's basically people who pretend to be smart reinventing the wheel.
Right.
That is the stock market.
Okay.
A stock is a share in the profits and the cash flows of a business that makes money. Mm-hmm. And that's why the stock market works. Mm-hmm. You're buying a contract. People say, oh, it's like, you can't see it. It's nothing. No, actually, it's a legal contract.
Right.
It's a real thing. Mm-hmm. You buy a stock, you're buying ownership into a business. Crypto is the same thing, except there is no business.
Right.
That's what crypto is.
So is crypto unregulated or?
It's barely regulated.
Okay.
And this has been a big problem with the SEC, which has been one of my issues, is the SEC has decided we don't really know where we stand on this. And I think the reason that they do that is because if they were to get serious about it, they'd be like, yeah, this shit is fucking illegal.
Right.
Like this should not
exist. It seems like illegal adjacent.
There's illegal adjacent is a perfect way to describe it in my view. I've also described it as legal crime.
Okay.
This is criminal behavior that we haven't really put words to yet, where people are grifting each other and selling them stakes in things that are worthless and hyping up the value of these things, and then they crash. Now, the other argument that people would say, which I get, is like, every man for himself. Like, do your research.
Right.
If you think that, this thing is valueless, then don't invest in it. Okay, fair enough. But we have regulations for a reason. And I'm someone that believes that regulations are there to protect people, especially people who don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really know what's going on with crypto. And people are losing thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on this bullshit. And those are the stories you don't hear. You only hear the story of the guy who made like 3 million on Trump coin and 4 million on like Fart Rocket or whatever the fuck coin
the Hawk Tua coin.
Or the Hawk Tua coin.
And so has she just disappeared? Is that what happened? Or
I guess. I feel like I saw that she maybe did one podcast, like she came back for a second. I have no idea.
So the meme coins, when you hear of Trump coin or meme coin or any of those, like that's under crypto.
Yes.
And then people, wow. So that's so crazy.
Yeah.
And
the only thing that I think is maybe legit is Bitcoin.
Right.
What
makes it different?
The only analogy that I accept about Bitcoin is that it's digital gold.
Okay.
You look at what gold is, and gold has, aside from being jewelry, it doesn't really have that much value in the real world beyond its symbolic value. It doesn't generate cash flows in the same way that a company does. And so people make the argument, well, this is like the digital version of that, which I actually accept that.
Yeah.
I think that gold is a useless investment to begin with.
Okay.
So that's why I think that Bitcoin is, unless you're just trading on the momentum of, the hype surrounding Bitcoin, I consider it kind of a useless thing to invest in. And I see gold as the same thing. I don't see the value in investing in gold, which is going to sit there in a vault, versus investing in Nvidia, which is going to create chips and create economic value and establish, a real role in the economy and generate cash. So that's the way I see it. And all of the other stuff beyond Bitcoin, total bullshit. The only people who are winning that stuff are the people who are making these coins themselves and their friends who say, hey, I'm about to drop this thing in 2 hours. Get in now because I'm going to use my big social media following to pump the coin.
Right.
And like wink, wink, make sure to cash out within 7 or 8 hours whenever I tell you to.
And then it crashes.
And it's a legal way of stealing money from the public.
It's crazy.
It's fucked. I hate it.
It's fucked, and it's really, really dark that it's kind of marketed to young people as
well.
Yes,
because of course we're trying to find the next big thing.
Right.
Like, oh my god, I figured out that there's this thing called crypto, and like you can like securitize the value of your business online. It's like, yeah, that's the stock market, dude.
Right.
That's what this thing has been around for a long time.
It's really sad and depressing that so many young Americans, that's kind of what they have to rely on, and they feel like it's the same as how now the number one job kids say they want to do is YouTuber, influencer, because it's like the only way to secure your place in this country now is by basically a miracle, which is a huge, huge fundamental problem.
Totally.
That it's like I don't know how long we can go for in this fashion, because it feels completely unstable.
Exactly.
And it makes me nervous, and it's really sad to watch this country just kind of crumble in on itself.
And we're seeing all this massive surge in sports betting as well, which is being legalized everywhere.
I know.
I'm so sympathetic to that argument where you have young people saying like, well, what else can I do but make these crazy Hail Mary bets on Cum Rocket and Fart Coin?
Right.
And I accept that argument, and I think it's fair. It's like, we've been dealt a terrible hand. No wonder we found this very strange pseudo criminal way of like getting rich. But let's still be honest about what it is. it's basically crime.
Yeah.
You're basically stealing from people who know less than you.
Yeah.
And if that's the way you want to do it, then okay, have at it, and you can do it today because we're not really regulating this thing.
Right.
But let's be real about what it is. This is not an admirable or noble way to make money.
On the topic of sports betting, I don't know if it was you or Scott. You kind of blend into one, which is so cool for you. But I think, in the countries, I believe, that where sports betting became legal on the phones, it's like divorce is up and like bankruptcy is up and suicide is up. Like really, really negative statistics correlating with the legalization of phone sports betting. What's your take on that? Do we need more regulation? Should it be illegal? How do you feel?
This is again, it's very similar to the crypto. I hadn't seen the divorce and the depression, but that makes total sense to me. What I had seen is that bankruptcy rates go way up, which makes all the sense in the world to me. I'm inherently against sports betting, and I'm kind of pro-regulation that prevents people from making really bad decisions. The trouble is, you don't want to baby people.
Right.
Like, you don't want to just say, "Hey, you can't do that. You're endangering yourself."
Right. So it's not very American.
It's not very American, and people are going to do what they're going to do. I think what we can do a better job of is just like getting the word out.
Right.
And educating people like, "Hey, the odds are stacked against you. Like, this is probably not going to be a good way of making money." I have so many conversations with my friends where they're like, "Dude, like, I bet, this amount on this thing. I made $8,000 yesterday.
I know.
How sick is that?" And I'm like, "Wow, that's crazy. Like, I'd love to just get $8,000. What about the 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks before that?"
Yeah.
In the past 7 weeks, I'm actually underwater.
Right.
It's like, what the fuck are you bragging for?
I know.
Like, you're losing money doing this. And I think if you look at what's happening to most people, like, this is a loss-making venture.
Yeah.
You're really not going to make money by sports betting. Maybe there are like a couple people who do it well, who are like geniuses.
But they're the exception, not the rule.
They're the exception. And it's just, this is not how you're going to get rich, and it's like a waste of your time in my view.
No, it's a really slippery slope. We had a caller on the show a couple weeks ago who had found out that her husband had taken out a loan in her name because he was going into gambling debt, $30,000, which is a good segue. I want to ask you about marriage and finances. Very sticky topic. What do you think about combining finances when you get married?
Oh, I don't know enough about this because I'm like,
you're too young.
I think I'm too young, but we've spoken to people who, we had this guy Ramit Sethi, who's kind of like the money for couples expert on the podcast. His view is that you should 100% combine finances when you get married.
Really?
Yes, but not what you had beforehand. If you had like significant assets going into it. This is basically for people who are inheriting money. That's money that you got yourself. But once you get married, you're building the life together. It's you're going into an obligation where this is our life. It's not my life and your life. It's us. And his view is you should combine finances. You should have your own credit cards to do your own stuff. You should also have a joint credit card. Is his view. And I'm not totally sure because I'm not married yet, so I don't know what makes the most sense. But having talked with him, it makes sense to me, and it sounds pretty good to me. So I guess if I were to make any recommendation, it would be to check out what Ramit Sethi has to say on this topic, and he's really good at it.
What about dating and finances? Like, who should pay on the first date? How do you balance, your views on, or not your views, but like the facts about the economy and young people struggling with the views about masculinity that, you and Scott share? What do you think about that?
I'm old school. I don't know why, but I think the guy always pays.
Yeah.
I just think I think that's the setup. And if you want to get off to a good start, and why wouldn't you on a date, just like pay. And I think it requires some discipline, and you have to figure out, okay, what can I actually afford?
Right.
It's a terrible idea to go to like Tao or some like insane like nightclub dinner place and just spend your whole paycheck on this one date. Like that's a bad idea. But I do think that you should figure out, okay, what am I comfortable paying? And go into it thinking, okay, yeah, I'm going to pay. Like I'm going to invest in getting this on the right foot. And the reality is like girls, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, girls like that.
Of course. No, I tell my followers like no exceptions. Like the guy pays on the first day. If a guy asks you out, he's going to pay for the drinks because otherwise it's like, you know, women, we still make like, what is it? 84 cents on the dollar. Black women make like 64 cents on the dollar in this country. Then I could go on, but you know, no maternity leave, like the fact that we have to pay for all the expected beauty treatments and this and that, like I could go on forever. The guy is paying for the first 4 dates. Yeah. In my opinion.
I'm completely with you. I think there are probably a lot of dudes who aren't making money who say like that's.
But then it's almost like then you need to go figure that out.
Exactly.
Because
this is the thing. If like, you can't pay for a drink, then you've got bigger fish to fry.
I hate to say it, but I'm like, if he can't pay for like a vodka soda, then he can't pay for Plan B.
Exactly.
Then he can't pay for this or that. Like, you need to figure that out. That's not an attack on people who don't have money. That is genuinely, I think, an important thing to think about. If you are asking someone to spend time with you, well, where's that going to lead?
Exactly. So this is why I'm sympathetic to the issues, but if you want to take your life into your own hands, you do need to figure out a way to go out and make money. One other point, don't go on like a million dates.
Totally.
Like this is the other thing that I'm seeing among my friends and in our generation is, you know, these dudes are like turbo swiping on Hinge and Tinder and Raya, and they're going on like a million dates. And to me, I don't see the point of that. I think that that's just a bad way to go about it. And I think, you know, if you want like my, I guess, kind of hot take on what men should be doing when it comes to dating, it's like, I think we should be not engaging in hookup culture and this one night stand culture as much as possible, because, you know, I talked about we're spending 40% of our waking hours on our phone.
Yeah.
The odds are stacked against us. We just don't have that much time. So why are you going on these dates? Basically just to sleep with someone.
Right.
That's kind of the goal on going on a million dates and buying them drinks. Like, why aren't you spending more time being thoughtful about like, what's the kind of partner that I want?
Right.
Like, who is someone, I cannot tell you how many of my friends will go on a first date and I'm like, how did it go? And it's like, oh, well, she said that she liked what I was doing with this, and she liked this, and she liked this. And, you know, we didn't go home together, but I think we'll probably go home together, like on the next day or whatever. Did you like her?
No, it's like we've completely,
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah. It's like we've lost like how to be human.
Yes.
It connects with everything that we've said, you know, over the past hour. It's like, just go and be a person. Like, did you have a vibe? Was there an energy?
Was there a connection?
Was there a connection?
Were you interested in the things that she had to say? And to be fair to men, I think we're wired differently, where like the goal is to win. And in this case, winning means the girl thought you were interesting and charming and cool and attractive. And so we're so obsessed with that as the goal. Like, how do I make her like me? How do I make her think I'm cool? How much money should I spend? All of these things. But we forget to ask the most important question, which is, okay, if I want to have a partner in my life,
right,
do I like this person? Do we have a connection?
Yeah.
I think men, especially in Gen Z, should be asking that more often.
It all comes back to intentionality. I think that's what we all need to focus on.
100%.
Forward. That's a great note to end on. Ed, thank you so much for joining me. Tell Scott that I say hi.
I will tell him. I'm going to send this immediately to him.
And
he's traveling all the time, so this is the problem. But,
I know.
You like,
it'll happen.
In person.
It's going to be fabulous when it happens.
It's going to be great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. This was great.
Bye, guys.